Hey there, everybody. It's Rob. Just want to let you know, unfortunately, the audio is not great in this one. I did not have my microphone recording during the interview, so I had to pull it from TikTok, so the audio might be a little bit messed up, but hey, appreciate you listening.
Welcome in, everybody, to the Please Stay Inside podcast. This is episode number 6. My name is Rob. Today we are with our wonderful guest, the T virus system. They are a dissociative identity disorder system, mother of 6 biological children, and you can find them over on TikTok at the_T_virus_system. T virus system, welcome on in.
Hi.
It is very, very wonderful to have you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, about your TikTok page. What is it that brought you over to TikTok?
Well, I started TikTok before I even knew that I was a system. And it was just a way to, kind of let loose, even, I kind of had that stigma for a little while of, I'm too old for something like TikTok. And then
Yes.
one day I was like, I don't care anymore,
Mm-hmm.
And then I got it. And it's actually the Gianu system. Her dissociative experience cards are what led me to start believing that I had dissociative experiences. And then from there, with a therapist, we ended up being diagnosed with DID. So TikTok helped me become diagnosed, actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do really find as being one of the bright spots of TikTok is that it does just do such a wonderful job of connecting us to our communities through these experiences. I've had so many times where I hear somebody talk about something and it's so specific and I'm like, I do that exact thing, and it helps out a lot to be able to broaden that.
It's honestly really crazy to me how accurate the algorithm is.
Yes. Yeah. It's very, very shocking sometimes.
Yeah.
Which is one of my personal favorite things to be able to see in comment sections, on videos. I'll have somebody come in and they're just like, the FYP is really coming for me today.
Yeah.
I always love that. So with your, let's I guess first start with just how do you describe dissociative identity disorder? In your own personal experience, how would you best describe it?
Well, I like to describe it. It is definitely a dissociative disorder. But I like to use the term trauma disorder because I think a lot of times we are further victimized by this idea that we're scary. And so by being like, look, this is actually from trauma that we have experienced. And by continuing that idea, that stigma, it just further hurts us, but when it comes to my own experiences, well, for a longest time, I really just thought that I had really bad mom brain, bad mom brain. I became a mom at 17. So, ever since I can remember, I've had really bad memory and, just unable to remember what we did earlier that day or, just all the things.
I hear you. Were you experiencing that prior to being 17, or I guess when did you?
Well, prior to 17, I actually, I was kicked out of my home at 14. And then from there, I was trafficked until 17. And during that time, I was on drugs pretty heavily. And due to that, I don't have very good memory of from 14 and on. And from 14 and younger is when my trauma was really, really happening pretty badly. So yeah, I don't have a lot of memories. Actually, a lot of those memories are starting to come back with therapy, and it's been a roller coaster.
Yeah, I bet. As trauma therapy so often can be. and like you said, with DID, it is a trauma disorder, which I think is such a good way of framing it. And so it can be, you know, yeah, definitely in that realm. Um, so how, I guess, did you begin to put some pieces together that perhaps this wasn't just mom brain, as you put it, but this was maybe something more like DID, or were there other things that you thought it might be?
Yeah, well, I actually got to a point where I started to worry that I might have tumor because things were just getting pretty crazy sometimes. The things that I would like just
Right.
forget, or I think the most scary times that I now know as co-fronting.
Hmm.
That is a pretty confusing time because, like, the best way that I like to explain it is like if you are playing a video game and it's just like a regular, regular game, and then someone else also takes a controller and they are controlling half of your character while you're controlling the other half of the character. It doesn't really sync up so well. And you can still like probably get through the game,
Sure.
especially when you start to learn how to really work together. But it's difficult. And so there were times, there's this one specific time that I remember where I started to really get worried, where I said, I was talking to my sister and I said something. I can't remember what I said exactly, but the last word I said blue instead of what I was trying to say. It had nothing to do with what I was saying, but I said the word blue. And then, it happens all the time. I say the wrong thing. So I
Sure.
went to correct myself. I said the sentence again, and the last word was blue again. And that happened 3 times before I finally said the right word. And that's when I went to my husband and I was like, something's really wrong with me because, like, that's not normal. I knew what I was trying to say, but I couldn't say it no matter how hard I tried. And now I recognize those days as co-fronting. And I think co-fronting doesn't happen like as often as, it doesn't happen as often. I don't know about other systems, but for us, it doesn't happen as often. So I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's not.
No, I hear you.
Yeah. Those times are like the most confusing and worrisome. And
And so within that moment, or I guess when these things do happen out of curiosity, does it feel more like conflicting interests? Does it just feel like two people are trying to control the same thing? How does it?
in those moments, I feel so much more confused because it does feel more like there's like literally just, like two people. But the co-conscious is more like if you're playing that video game and you have someone sitting right next to you telling you what to do, adding in little details, whatever, but they can't actually control the situation.
Right.
That is what I experience way more often. And that feels more like conflicting feelings, ideas. I finally feel like I'm a person for the first time in my life because I've had so many conflicting thoughts and ideas that I've never been political. I've never been like, set on a favorite color or a favorite, anything, because it always would change. Or sometimes I'd be like, this is it. But then at the same time, my brain's like, no, what about this? And I thought that was also me. And it's really, that's just other people are also pitching in. It's like if someone asked, what's your favorite color? And I'm sitting here talking to you, but I have 2 other people sitting next to me. And they're like, oh, but my favorite color is this and my favorite color is this,
Right. That there's so much competition for like, actually, this is our favorite.
Right.
I hear you. How does the communication look right now? But between parts, what term do you prefer? Parts, alters?
Either. I
Okay.
most of the time say alters, but I do say parts sometimes. Um, and right now it's we don't have like the best communication. We're still trying to become more functional. Um,
Mhm.
we are more functional than we ever have been, and for the first time feels like we actually have some kind of communication, and a lot of that communication looks like us like seeing images in our head, or
Mhm.
like my son this morning was reminding me that I owed him Robux, and I was just
Mm.
like, do I like, do I
Uh-huh.
want some Robux? And
Uh-huh.
um but he like described the
Mm.
scene a little bit, and all of a sudden this like image popped in my head, and it's sort of like someone explaining to you a movie that they know you've watched,
Mm.
but no matter how much they're explaining it to you with their words, you can't quite, like, you have no idea what they're
Yeah.
talking about. But as soon as you see that image of the
Mm.
of the movie in front of you, or a scene, it's like it all starts to come back. And that's because a lot of our memories are secondhand memories, so it is like we're watching a movie. We experienced it also, but we were the
Mhm.
co-con person, the person watching, not the person experiencing. And so
Wow.
it's a secondhand memory. And so whenever that person who experienced it shares that memory, shares
Mhm.
that image, that's them communicating, hey, it did happen. Like,
Mhm. Right.
luckily my kids don't really lie to me that often. So
Yeah.
like,
Thank
worry
goodness.
too much.
Uh, that's really interesting though. Like and you describe it so beautifully of like, this movie that you've seen, but you didn't realize you've seen it. And so, I mean, for you memory wise, are you able to kind of differentiate like, I know I was fronting at that point, or I think I was co-con at that point. Like, it, does it operate in that way?
Yeah, I a lot of times I can figure it out better afterwards,
Sure.
or if I've been that person for a while, then all of a sudden it kind of like hits me. I'm not like constantly thinking, who am I? Who am I? Who
Sure.
am I? And so
Mhm.
it's like I have to almost remind myself that I have to think about that, because,
Mhm.
you know, as a singlet, which I always thought I was a singlet,
Mhm.
you don't have to think about that. You don't have to question, who am I today? Who am I right now? And so for the
Mhm.
first time in my life, I'm having to like take a second and reflect. And
Mhm.
I'm not a very stop, slow down kind of person,
Mhm.
because I have 6 kids and I homeschool those 6 kids. So like
Mhm.
everything is go, 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 go. And
Right.
um, so it's kind of hard for me to like take that second to stop, slow down, be like, okay, who am I right now? And then that process isn't as like very easy either,
Mhm.
um, because I have to start to, you know, break down my likes, dislikes. Some of them
Right.
have very similar likes,
Mhm.
especially because a lot of times your alters will split off of another alter. So like our old host was mother. Um, and that's because that's was her role in the system,
Mhm.
was she became the host when we were pregnant with our first child. And but our oldest child is 12 now, and we just had our sixth 5 months ago, and it was very, very, very stressful time, and mother was really,
Mhm.
really depressed. And because she couldn't handle the load any longer, that's when I split off as Jesse. So I am actually the newest split in the whole system, but um, I have all these memories that are mother's because I am directly related to mother in the system. Like I came directly
Mhm.
from mother. So we have the best communication between each other. Um,
Mhm.
and that's kind of how it is. Like when therapists are talking about like mapping out the system, it's figuring out who is connected to who has the best communication, who needs to work on their communication. And
Mhm.
um, so, yeah.
Interesting. And so I guess I want to ask what the experience of splitting is like, but I wonder if it's yeah, I guess I just wonder what that experience is like.
So I don't know exactly the moment the split happened, and I
Sure.
don't know if people. I'm sure that there's someone out there who has like experienced like the feeling or whatever. But for us, and I think a lot of people have described it as like um, sometimes it'll feel like you've had like a migraine for several days.
Hmm.
You're you just feel really tired. I was feeling for. I mean, I had just had a baby,
Hmm.
and I ended up having a C-section, and just a
Wow.
whole bunch of things that just went wrong in my
Goodness.
pregnancy and everything. So it was really, really rough. And I was already dealing with a lot of pain and was on a lot
Hmm.
of pain medication. So, um, but I remember telling my husband that even though, like, when I hadn't taken my pain medication, I could feel the immense pain in my stomach from the C-section. But even with the medication, I was still just had this terrible headache that just would not go away. And um, and I don't even think we realized right away that Jesse had split off because we were still
Hmm.
also very new to our system. Um, and it wasn't until right after I had the baby that we actually were matched with a DID specialist. So I had therapy and they treated me as if I had DID, but I wasn't diagnosed until I was with the specialist.
Hmm. Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, you said that was about 2 years ago?
So I started with therapy for DID about 2 years ago, but the DID specialist um,
I think I
started.
lost you over on
Um,
Google for a moment. Well, all
okay, there you go. Sorry.
right, we got you back. Hey, it's all good. It's all good.
Um, yeah, so my um, I originally got therapy for dissociation
Hmm.
and started to figure out that I had DID with my therapist, my regular therapist, but she didn't feel like she had the credentials to really diagnose me with DID.
Hmm.
So once she got to a point where she didn't feel like she could really treat me anymore, um, I found a specialist, a DID specialist, and started talking to them. And that was about 5 months ago, like right after I had my baby.
Okay. Wow, what a busy time. I mean,
Yeah.
to oh, therapist, especially after everything you've been through.
It was a huge relief, honestly.
Oh,
Um,
wonderful.
my other therapist, she was good,
Mhm.
but my experience with most therapists was that I felt like a study project.
Mhm.
I felt like they were learning from me, and um, especially this last time, because of the fact that most of the time when I would come with an issue, and they wouldn't know how to solve that issue. But then by the time they had figured out how to solve that issue, I had already figured out a way to solve that issue myself,
Mm.
using, TikTok or whatever. Like I would just ask
Right.
the DID community, hey, this is what's going on. What do I do? And then
Mm.
I would be like, hey, this is how I solved my issue. And then they had that tool in their tool belt for the next time. And even though
Mhm.
that's great, I'm so glad that they have that tool now. I really needed somebody to give me that tool, to show
Right.
me what I needed, because that's what I was there for therapy for.
Mhm.
And so it felt like the roles were sort of reversed. And it was almost taxing to go to therapy,
Mhm.
even though I knew
Right.
I needed it at the time, especially because I was having so many ups and downs um,
Mhm.
with the pregnancy and everything. And when I started, like, every single session I've had with my DID specialist has been like so enlightening. she gives me a new tool every time. She helps me through
Uh-huh.
all these like crazy little hurdles. And it's been really, really great. Um, like I don't know why, but I have an issue writing things down.
Mhm.
Um, and when I think about it, like I said, that whole like image thing, that every time I talk about writing something down, I see this huge callus on my middle finger. And so
Mhm.
I'm sure that I had some kind of trauma that had to do with writing.
Mhm.
And because of that, the communication in our system is much harder because a lot of times people will write things down on notes and that's
Mhm.
how they communicate.
Right.
And we don't do that. And but she was like, "Well, why don't you start writing things down in the inner world? Because then it's
Mm.
safe. It's safe in the inner world and they can still see it and you just create a message board on the inner world." And I was so amazed at how well that worked.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
I was I was thinking of things I needed to buy at the store and I kept writing it down in the
Mhm.
inner world. And then later, whenever I was like, okay, what do I need? I just closed my eyes and it was like it was right there. And it also is supposed to help me with like writing things, even though I'm not actually writing
Mhm.
something. In my mind, I am. I'm pushing that boundary of writing things is not okay.
Mhm.
And um, yeah, it's been just magnificent, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, that is spectacular to get. I mean, because I could only imagine how exhausting it is to have to go into your therapy session, begin to, talk about some things, and then having to take a pause and like, oh, well, this is actually what this experience is like. This is what I'm talking about, and then I have to come back to it, and then to leave the session kind of feeling like I need to go continue to look into this,
Mm-hmm.
and not having that, and now you have somebody who understands all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Wow.
it's a huge relief. It's like I look forward to my sessions with her, and like honestly, if I could go twice a week, I would be
Mhm.
going twice a week at this
Uh,
point because I feel like I have like the amount of communication and everything in our system. Like I think that she also feels very safe to everybody because she's been helping us,
yeah.
you know, so much. Because the communication just in the 5 months that I've been with her has
Hmm.
been in like an immense change.
Yeah.
So it's been just, yeah, it's been life changing.
Yeah. That
And
is
I
such a
really
gift.
hate that like there's so many people out there who just can't get that because it is really, really life changing.
Right, right. And I mean, even just aside from, getting the specialization and trying to get, certifications and all that process, which can be, quite a bit on top of the degree, it's also, mental health care is paywalled. And so, having to find a specialist, are they in my network? And, that's a whole thing.
Mhm.
Uh, for you and this new therapist that you have, is there anything that they do? And if you aren't comfortable talking too much about the therapy session, please do let me know. But is there anything that they do as a therapist that you feel like really just connects with what you feel like you need as somebody who has DID?
I think it was the validation that
Mhm.
really helped. Um, because like, so when I first started to really just, I had so much doubt that I even had DID, even whenever it was
Mhm.
becoming just very clear, it was still very hard for me to even accept it to the point that months after I had finally even been like, okay, I have DID,
Mhm.
I still wouldn't talk to my husband about it for
Mhm.
months afterwards because it was just such a like a gut punch. It made
Mhm.
so much sense. It really
Right.
brought a lot of things together. And that felt good, but at the same time it was this like what?
Mhm. Yeah.
And um I was so sure that I would have known, you know.
Mhm.
And And I think my husband said the same thing at one point, well, I would have known. And now he's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he sees it all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, but her validation, it really, really just stuck with us because like when we got a psychiatrist. It was already a frustrating situation because we were going through a program, a mental health program. So they set us up with a psychiatrist. They asked if we would prefer a male or female. We said female. We have a tough time talking to like professional males a lot, especially if they're going to be the professional over us.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
so I was expecting a female, and then the Zoom um, call came up, and it was this male, and so
Oh,
it took me by surprise right off the
mm-hmm.
bat. But then after that, I wasn't even going to bring up the fact that I thought I had DID because I was still
Mm-hmm.
very new into it, and I wasn't sure, and you know, so all I did was say that, he asked why we started therapy, and I said because
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of dissociation, and the psychiatrist was like, he's like, well, explain your dissociation. So I explained very basic dissociative
Mm-hmm.
experiences, like zoning out and feeling like I can't even like get my body to like get up off the couch or whatever because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like I'm not in charge of the body in that moment
Mm-hmm.
or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
But like
Right.
I explained these things to him, and then he's like, that's not dissociation. Dissociation is where you have um, many personalities. And
Oh.
I was like, no, I'm not talking about dissociative identity disorder.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm just talking about having dissociation. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, no. He's like, I'm just trying to educate you. I'm just trying to educate you. And I'm like, okay, man, sure.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously aren't up
Nice.
to date on, the DSM-5 because,
Mm-hmm.
DID is where you have different identity states. And
Mm-hmm.
there is no personalities. It has nothing to do with personalities. So you're
Right.
even using the wrong terminology. I didn't say any of that stuff, but I was thinking that to myself, And so then I
Right.
was like, okay, I can't see this guy again. Like he made me feel really, really terrible. And
I
then I
bet.
ended up with a different psychiatrist, female. I told her that I actually thought I had DID because it took me months to even get to this new psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me this was our first meeting. She had not heard any of my experience as a child or growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, oh, I don't think you have DID because it's very, very rare. And I'm like,
Sure.
okay, yeah.
But not non-existent.
I'm just like, yeah, I know it's rare, but like
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, And
Right.
even then, like if you add OSCD and DID, which I really think
Mm-hmm.
that OSCD and DID need to just become one and it needs to be a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
But
I like that.
um, if you include both of them, the numbers are 8% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
That is more than redheads,
Mm-hmm.
but, you know, so it's really not that rare. And that's only from what they've been able to like track. That's not even
Right.
including, all these people who are just like going undiagnosed their whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And um, so, yeah. And then she ended up trying to diagnose me with BPD, but
Mm-hmm.
my therapist, the one that wasn't the specialist at the time, was like, no, I know for sure you don't have BPD. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
definitely don't have those kinds of ups and downs. But yeah, I've had therapists and stuff try to diagnose me with like bipolar, BPD, just like I think there's so many different things, and
Mm-hmm.
none of them felt like they fit whenever I would like
Right.
research them and like try to be like learn about that community and all that stuff. I just would not fit. And for the first time, it felt like, wow, this explains
Mhm.
all the
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, you get to connect to an experience finally that just makes sense for you.
Mhm.
And I mean, after such a history of just being invalidated over and over again, I mean, I, it's amazing that you were able to stay with the process and keep yourself involved in saying, okay, this individual is like this, but let me see what this next person is going to be like. I mean, what does that take to be able to stick with that?
Well, honestly, it wasn't until I actually thought, like, got to a point of being like, I have DID
Hmm.
that I got to that point of like, I got to stick with this.
Hmm.
Um, I had gone to therapy for the first time when I was 17. After I had, got off the drugs, I got pregnant about a month afterwards, and with my firstborn, and um, sorry, I am losing
It's
what I
okay.
was saying. What did you just ask me?
Take your time. Take your time. So, essentially, like that journey of, you're trying to find the right therapist, you're
Oh
facing a
yes,
validation here and here. Yeah,
sorry.
you're
Um,
good.
yeah, so I started therapy for the first time at 17, after I had gotten off the drugs when I was pregnant. And that therapist was actually the only one that I had ever liked up until this point.
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and it's funny because the one session that I actually remember, I described a dissociative experience to her. Uh, I explained to her that sometimes it feels like like I'm in my body
Hmm.
and I'm hearing, like, someone could tell a joke and I'm hearing the joke and I might be laughing about the joke, but
Hmm.
my body's not. And I'm, you know, I'm like, I might think it's funny, and then someone might be like, why are you upset? And I'll be like,
Hmm.
I'm not upset. I thought my face showed that I was happy, but it was
Hmm.
because, and now I recognize this because, I was experiencing me as the other person, like the
Hmm.
experience that I was remembering was the co-con person who,
Hmm.
you know, is just experiencing it from the inside.
Right, right, right. Okay, so you reach this point then where the confidence builds that this is DID, everything's starting to connect, and we're working with this specialist, and it sounds like so far so good, which is awesome. Um, so I guess shifting into, you know, the because I know you talked a little bit about, how your husband was like, well, I feel like I would have known and all that kind of stuff. How, if you're open to talking about it, how has that process been of, trying to discover this stuff, and how has he taken it, I guess?
He's been really good.
Wonderful.
I It's been a learning curve for sure.
Sure.
I definitely It was very hard for us to talk about it. Demi
Mhm.
was Demi's been the one who really just wants to be seen. Um,
Mhm.
and she's quite infatuated with her husband anyways.
Mhm.
So she was the one who kind of was like pushing those boundaries of like, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. And so then, like, she would talk to him about it. Someone else would come forward later and then just feel like so judged in that. Like, even though
Mhm.
he may not have been judging,
Sure.
it felt that way because we weren't ready to talk about it. And she just went ahead and did it.
Mhm.
And because of that fear of being judged, that's what sorry.
Oh, it's
Okay.
okay.
Kids are walking around.
Yeah.
Um, um, I forgot what I was saying.
It's okay. You're talking a
I
bit
do this
about
a lot.
it's okay. It's okay. I mean, the parenting doesn't stop. Um, so you're talking a bit about Demi's experience of, wanting to be seen, and um how I guess that yeah, I guess how that process was going into all of this, and how he would say some things it would feel a little invalidating, and you know.
Yeah, so like he never said anything that felt invalidating at all.
Hmm.
Um, it was more just that, the others weren't ready to talk. And because they
Hmm.
weren't ready, it felt like someone told a secret, you know? It's
Hmm.
like as a group, because we are just this one group,
Hmm.
we all have this secret. And even though he knew that this is like the diagnosis, this is what we're like, you know, he knew that this is what I was looking into. Um, when Demi went and talked to him about the DID stuff,
Hmm.
it felt like she just left this group of this is our secret and went and told.
Hmm.
And so it caused some issues in the system at first, but in the end, it ended up being a good thing because now she's the confident one that goes to talk to the husband about
Hmm.
things that we
Hmm.
may not want to talk about.
Sure.
So,
Sure, sure. And so now you have, that alter who is confident to have these conversations, which, when we talk about systems, a lot of the time, it's out of necessity that we all come out and, have these different roles, from my understanding of it. Um, okay, interesting. So I guess broadening to the rest of the family, I know that one of the things, of course, you are a parent of six. Um, and so what is that like, first and foremost?
um, being a mom is hard, no matter whether you're a singlet or
Hmm.
whether you're, you know, multiple.
Absolutely.
um, being a mom and homeschooling
Hmm.
is really, really difficult. But I honestly feel like the DID, I, me as Jessie, who is one of the moms,
Hmm.
I feel like it's sort of like a superpower because
Yeah.
when mother was created, um, so when we got pregnant with our first, again, we were 17, freshly off of meth. So like
Hmm.
it was a big thing. Um, I was with a guy who is not the best guy. We ended up being married for 5 years. And I was so scared. I was so scared that I was not going to be a good mom, that I was just
Hmm.
going to perpetuate you know, the same kind of life that I went through or whatever,
Hmm.
even if I didn't, even if it wasn't that bad, just knowing that, the trauma I went through, I'm not going to be a good mom at all.
Hmm.
And, but I also was heavily Christian.
Hmm.
And so things like abortion, that wasn't an option.
Hmm.
I also knew that I would never be able to just like give up my child.
Hmm.
So, um, so I just started studying. I started studying every single thing I could about pregnancy, about babies, about,
Hmm.
the female anatomy, like just
Hmm.
everything. Um, and that's when mother like split. I don't know when exactly because again, we
Right.
weren't a system back then,
Sure.
but that's the earliest memories that mother can like get are being pregnant in the late stages of our pregnancy and then having our first son. And like her whole aesthetic is like Stepford wife.
Hmm.
She's like the perfect mom, the perfect wife, the
Hmm.
perfect, Christian or whatever.
Hmm.
And we don't identify as Christian anymore, including mother. That was one of the things that caused her to like go into a deep depression. But,
Hmm.
um, but that was who she was. And so it was like
Right.
we created this super mom. And then we just had this super mom. And anytime she was forward, the only thing she wanted to do was play with these kids
Hmm.
and teach these kids and homeschool these kids, like, um, and so all of her time and all of her effort was just put towards these kids, and they ended up being like super smart and like really well behaved, and like I am like really impressed that they've turned
Mhm.
out so well.
Uh-huh. Oh, that must feel good though. All those fears of like passing on the trauma, which is such a valid thing, and it's something that people, even though it is such a scary thought, it is so important to consider. Like, how do I ensure that my trauma does not affect, how I then raise my kids? And so for you to have that and then do the work, and for your kids to end up as amazing as they are, that is such a phenomenal thing. Are there things that I guess helped make things run a little bit more smoothly as a system, as a parent who's a system trying to make all this work and yeah.
Um, yeah, so before I knew I was a system,
Hmm.
um, things were just way more confusing. And, like I said, I would forget that I would promise my kids things,
Hmm.
uh, or just whatever. Like I would have dissociative experiences that would like just like really lay me out.
Hmm.
Like when I call it the hangover fog, or the not hangover fog. I mean, I am mixing two things up. What I'm trying to say is therapy hangover
Hmm.
or a dissociative fog.
Hmm.
Because if I would have therapy, all of a sudden I would just like feel like I couldn't do anything. I'd be stuck on the couch. My whole body would just feel exhausted, and I wouldn't be able to like do anything really for a while. I would just need some time to let my body rest after
Right.
having therapy. And like I realized that before I knew I had dissociative identity disorder. But since then, I've had my therapist teach me some tricks on how to deal with that, how to,
Hmm.
lock up what we talked about, how to put it in the
Hmm.
box, and then,
Right.
um, lock it up in a safe, and that has helped that fog immensely. So now I know that I don't have to like, because like if I have my therapy at like noon, well then
Right.
I have to try to get as much schoolwork done as possible
Hmm.
first thing that morning because I may not be
Right.
able to do
Right.
it later. So that's helped a lot. And then just knowing that there might be things that I don't realize are a trigger for me.
Mm.
Something might trigger me, um, and then I have that same kind of fog where I just feel
Hmm.
like I can't focus. Everything around me even seems blurry, more blurry than
Hmm.
it already is. 'Cause I'm supposed to be wearing glasses, but
Hmm.
like, and it's like hard to concentrate on what people are saying. Before, I wouldn't understand why I was feeling that way,
Hmm.
and my kids might try and come talk to me, ask me for things, whatever, and like I would like get overwhelmed and be like,
Hmm.
you know, having to like shoo them away and like not understanding what was going on. And now, because I understand, I can be like, I can explain it to them.
Right.
And because I understand, I can help them understand.
Hmm.
And that is really helpful because I don't want them to ever feel like, you know, you guys are too much for me and
Hmm.
I can't handle you right now. And that's, I wanted to make sure that wasn't the message that was coming across to my children,
Right.
because it's not that they're too much for me, it's
Hmm.
that I have my own trauma responses,
Right.
and I need to know how to work through that. And when you don't know how to work through it, sometimes you just feel completely lost.
Mm. Yeah. I love that openness that just let's just face this head on. I'm not going to, hide this from you or, anything like that. Because yeah, like you said, that could totally give the impression that like, oh, I just did something to make mom upset. How do you have those kinds of conversations with kids? Because this is like, I feel like DID can feel so complex sometimes.
Yeah, so um, I have a pretty good amount of communication with my kids because I do
Hmm.
homeschool already.
Right.
Um, but honestly, one of my biggest things that, like, I was like, this is what I'm doing for sure with my kids, was that I was not going to lie to them. I wasn't going to keep them in the dark.
Mm,
Even over the little things, Santa
right.
Claus, even, like,
Hmm.
you know, we can have fun with Santa Claus. I don't need to tell you that he's real and have you lose your trust
Hmm.
in me. You
Right.
know, I would rather have them know that I'm always going to be honest with them. If they don't
Hmm.
need to know about it, then I'm not going to talk to them about it.
Sure.
um, and then I think the biggest thing is doing things, you know, doing things at the right levels. Um, it's a lot like another very complicated conversation you have to have with kids
Hmm.
is, um, as they get older, talking to them about their own anatomy.
Right.
And you have to start that at a younger age, but you have to do it at the right age level.
Hmm.
And as they get older, you just add on little pieces. And so it's kind of how I'm doing it. Um, my two oldest is 10 and 12, and they are very smart already, very just intelligent little children. But
Hmm.
um, they can understand better what's going on. I can explain to them the fact that when they're born, they are born with ego states. They can see that in their 4-year-old brother, who can go from a screaming tantrum to suddenly
Hmm.
very happy
Hmm.
because he saw a bird fly through the window, like fly past the window,
Hmm.
like, and so I can explain that with these examples and show them, look, this is how all of us are born. And you guys are now at an age
Hmm.
where those ego states, they've melded together.
Right.
You are now this one. And that's why you now have these like specific things that is like part of your identity that you really, really
Hmm.
feel is truly you. Um,
Hmm.
one's really into coding and one's really into,
Hmm.
outdoorsy stuff.
Hmm.
And I'm like, but these ones down here, these kids, they're still trying to figure out who they are. They still are separate in these ego states, and they still will jump from one emotion to another emotion or one big feeling to a different big feeling.
Hmm.
And um and so it's just like explaining it at their level, adding on
Hmm.
little pieces. A big part was the what is it called? Um something the quilt. Gosh
Oh, the
darn it.
patchwork quilt.
The patchwork quilt. Yep.
Hmm.
The patchwork quilt was like I had already explained to my three oldest about DID um, before I had learned about this book, but I still ended up bringing it and reading it to them and explaining with that as a reference. And you know, it was funny because I had already like explained it to them, but afterwards they were like, because it doesn't actually say anything about DID in the book. Um, it says in the front like it's a helps explain dissociative identity disorder, but it doesn't actually say those words in the whole book when you're reading it to them. And my kids picked up on the fact that that's what it was supposed to be about really fast. And they're now, my oldest is now getting comfortable enough that sometimes during certain situations, he'll be like, who's fronting, mom? Who's fronting right now? And I love that because I know that my kids are going to have different relationships with each of us as we get older. And when they're adults, every single one of us is going to have a different relationship with our children. Um, and even though that seems kind of big, it seems like a really big, heavy thing. I know that it's like something that is going to be broken up into pieces and that we're going to work towards. So,
It's, I mean, it's just, it's amazing to hear, I mean, just how you approach this. And, I mean, I just imagine with all of it, it not only helps your kids to understand you and what all is happening, but I think it just increases their own ability to understand themselves as well.
mm-hmm.
Like one of the about just about parts work in general is that it has so much application to everybody, even people who not DID. Like it's something that I relate a lot to. Like I have trauma, but not DID, and I can relate to that inner child part of myself.
Oh,
I have multiple alters living in this body.
excellent. Which it occurs to me now that 50 minutes into the interview, that probably is something we should have started with. But sometimes I don't even think about it. But yeah. So I guess in talking about DID, I know that there is so much stigma also attached to DID, and I wonder how you have viewed or experienced that stigma.
So I have a lot of agoraphobia. I don't leave my house very often.
Mm.
I try to push myself to do it, but recently, um, 3 times in a row, I left my house and some incident happened. And
Mm.
so I'm in one of those like moments where I feel like I can't leave very well anymore.
Mm.
But um, so out in the real world, I don't really experience much yet.
Mm.
I have, I think about 4 people in my life that know. I mean, everybody. I have announced it like on my Facebook and stuff like that.
Mm.
So like people know, but like 4 people that I talk to about my DID stuff,
Mm.
not including my husband, um, that like refer to me as the alters that I might be at the time and all that stuff. Um, and uh, online is honestly where I feel just my most authentic self a lot of
Mm.
times, because I do just get to refer to myself as who I am. I get to
Right.
be my authentic self. And um, but the main stigma that I get is whenever I talk about being a mom
Mm.
with DID, because I immediately get people who talk about how um, that's not right now. You need to wait. Okay. Can you give the dogs water? They're whining. Um, and I lost what I was saying. Sorry.
You're all good. So the view that people might have of you being a mom and having DID.
Yeah. So I've had people who will straight up be like, "Aren't you worried for the safety of your children?"
Mm. Wow.
Um, I've had people say that I was selfish for having
Mm.
children. Um, like I've had I've had lots of different things been said to me about my children. And the thing that just I find so interesting is that you don't just look at some person and be like, you might be bad for these children. Um,
Right.
and just because there are many of us
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that we're inherently bad. That
Right.
just means that there are several people. There are several people who are just in this one body. And we all became the mom of these children when they were born. We just
Mm.
experience that differently. Like mother feels very much like a mom.
Mm.
Jesse, me, I feel very much like a mom. Demi feels more like an aunt,
Mm-hmm.
And same with Lola. She considers herself more like an aunt, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Even John will totally accept them calling him mom because that is what we are. Um, but he feels more of like a big brother or protector, over the kids rather than, even a dad figure or anything.
Right.
And so you wouldn't be like, don't let that big brother babysit the kids. Don't let that aunt watch these children,
Right.
Unless you had a reason to feel that way. And so for people to be like, oh, well, because there's many of you, that's scary. It's just doesn't even really make sense. It's just like living in a house with all of your family there, except that it's just all in one body.
Right. And it's, for me, I mean, hearing you talk about it, it feels like it's like a fear of the unknown, that people don't understand DID too well. And then they're like, well, then certainly that must not work out. Like, that just to like jump to that conclusion. That's,
And I think,
where do you think it comes from? Oh, go ahead.
I think that another thing that a lot of people worry about is like the amnesia barriers. A lot of people are like, what do you do whenever during the time that you don't remember? The same things, the exact same things. I'll probably drink some coffee, I'll because it's not like we come from trauma. So most of our parts were there for protection. And so we're not going to go do something that is going to put us in a position where we feel like we're not going to be protected anymore. That a lot of times with people with DID, they actually have this like fear of doing something wrong because they were like, they felt like they were doing things wrong their whole life because they were told they were doing things wrong. And so they're not going to go out and do something scary or bad because they're scared to. They're going to get reprimanded,
Right. One of the things that comes to mind as you're talking about this is something that when we had the Halo system on in a previous episode, they had brought up how they felt like one of the things that people sometimes get wrong about DID is that they can sometimes view the different parts or alters as having these like really bad intentions, like kind of like what was demonstrated in the movie Split, where like there are some alters that are just like evil for the sake of being evil. And I wonder if, if you, what do you think about that stigma?
I think that, I think that stigma is like absolutely ridiculous because again, it's like every single alter has their own emotions. Every alter can feel sad, happy, angry, even might feel, some spite or whatever. But it's just like any other person who feels all of those ranges of emotions. It's not like one alter is only evil and one alter is, super sweet and, one might be more sweet than another. But that's because that's just their personality. Just like somebody else, like I might have a friend that's way sweeter than I am. But that's just who they are. That's just their personality. Doesn't mean that they don't have those other emotions also.
Right. Right, absolutely. Yeah, everyone can experience the same range of emotions, and just because somebody is sweet or, sometimes they're a little more, whatever. Yeah, it doesn't make people bad or anything like that.
Right. And I think that when singlets see people on TikTok or whatever talk about their persecutors, that also perpetuates this idea that there's evil alters. But, persecutors aren't even evil. And the whole reason for persecutors is that they are the same as a protector. It's just to them, talking down to you, making you feel little, keeps you home, keeps you safe, keeps you out of the public. They're going about it the wrong way. And that's why therapy, you work through those and you teach them how to respond the proper way and still have the same results. And then they end up just becoming protectors in the end. And so I even just hate the fact that there is a term persecutor because
hmm
what they're really trying to do is protect you. And I feel like a lot of times using that term can even make that alter feel like they are the bad alter, like they are
Right.
less. But by calling them what they're going to become, it can,
hmm
you know, pave this path for them to really want to do the work, to be better, to become better,
hmm
and not be, you know, a persecutor.
Right. I've heard the term misguided protector as being one
I
that
like that. I haven't heard of that yet, but I like that a lot.
yeah, yeah. I like it as well. Yeah, and a lot of what you're describing of like the belittling or like just in any way shaming it as a way of like protecting us and keeping us out of harm's way. It's something that is common among, I mean, among singlets as well, just across diagnoses. It's something you can see with generalized anxiety disorder, with PTSD, with depression. You know, this whole idea of like, oh, don't try that because something bad's going to happen. And my way of preventing you from doing that is there's no way you can achieve that, all these nasty kind of comments towards ourselves. And so it exists across all individuals. And so I certainly hear your point on that. So as we're kind of winding down, this has been an awesome conversation. I am just so I love talking to cycle breakers first and foremost, and you are the cycle breaker of cycle breakers. I mean, super mom, I think doesn't even do it justice. So I've really appreciated your insight. Um, so last question, I guess, what is something that you hope people can better understand about DID? What do you feel like people just, yeah,
Um,
what would you want to say to people?
I guess I really just hope that DID in general um, just becomes more well known in the
Mhm,
public, and that people can just be themselves in public, that it's well known enough that we can go out and be like, you know, this is who I am. I have dissociative identity disorder, and people can just like work with that, like in a job sense and everything, you know. Um, the idea of going out and working a job and having to mask as one person,
mhm,
it just feels almost dirty now that we
mhm.
know that we're
Right.
these different parts. Um, and I guess it sort of feels almost hurtful
Mhm,
trying to be what we're not, feeling like we have to hide. And um, so that's one of my big things when it comes to how the world perceives us. But I think another big thing is showing other multiples out there that they can be a mom, they can be a dad. It's okay. Like, it's
mhm,
scary. It is scary. Being a parent is hard. It really is. But it's not that different than a singlet. And as long as you really, really want it and you are willing to put the work in and you're, doing the therapy, like, go for it. If it's your dream to have
mhm.
children, do it. Don't let this stop you.
I love that message. I love that message. Oh, well, Jesse, the T virus system, thank you all so much for being here, for talking with us, for sharing your experience. Also, thank you so much to your kids for allowing us to
Oh, it's
borrow
been
you
so
for a little
hard, but
while.
it's been pretty chill.
Uh, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And thank you all so much for listening. This has been Rob. This has been the Please Stay Inside podcast. And thank you so much for listening. Take care.